Welcome to lesson number 4. In today's lesson, we're going to be looking at iteration and specifically while and for loops and how we can incorporate them into our code. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to close out of lesson number 3 and we're going to make lesson number 4. We're going to call it lesson 04. Okay, there we go. I'm going to give myself a little bit of space. So we've learned how to control the flow of our data through if statements, but now we're going to control it through iteration. And simply what that means is we're just going to loop the code. So it might go lines 1, 2, 3, and then it might check 4, 5, and then go back to 3 and so on. Now to really show that, we're going to make a guessing game. And to make a guessing game, we obviously need a couple of variables first. So the first one we're going to do is my number, and we're going to make that equal to any number between 1 and 10. So you can choose whatever you want. I'm going to go with number 7. And then I'm going to make the player guess. And I'm going to make that equal to int input. We'll say, I need to put something in there. Please guess a number between 1 and 10. All right. And now we won't do the looping yet. We'll do what we know, what we're comfortable with. We'll just do an if statement to see if they got it right. So we say if my number equals, remember, not just a single equals. If it equals player guess, then we're going to print correct. And if they got it wrong, we're going to say else. If they entered anything else, we're going to say print incorrect. Perfect. Oops. Incorrect. All right, so that will mean if the player enters something in and they get it right, it'll say correct. If they enter it in incorrectly, it'll say incorrect. All right, and let's just make sure this works. So if I run this code, please pick a number. Let's go 5, incorrect. Let's pick another number. And the right one this time, 7. All right, so I've tested it and it definitely works. So what I would like now is I'd like the player to be able to continuously guess until they get it correct. Now we need a couple of things to this. Firstly, I'm going to move this up a little bit. Let's just make it to the top, and I'll move this down to give myself some space. First thing we're going to need is a Boolean value. Now we talked about these in the first video. We talked about, whether if the person's online or not, it could say true or false. Well, we're going to make a variable called game over. We're going to make it equal to false, which means the game's going to run until this is false. So until this is true. So if game over equals true, the game ends. And now we have down here this little bit of code that we're going to iterate around. We want this to continuously run until they get it correct. Now the first of the 2 loops we're learning today is the while loop. So how a while loop works is, I'll start typing it in, while a specific value is true. So while a condition is true or false, this is going to run forever. So we're going to say while game over equals false. Okay, so while game over is stuck in this mode of false, and it'll run the code. Now you can see underneath, this code here is not part of this while loop. I'll give you a second to think about why it might not be part of the while loop. If you said because it's not indented, you'd be correct. So I can actually select all of it and push tab. And now it goes across. It's now part of this loop. Now the other thing you're going to notice here is you see this little line underneath that goes across. That's because there is a different way you can write this. You could, if you wanted it to, write it like so. Oh, it didn't change for us. Let's see if it'll do it now. Yep. You could write it like so. You can say while not game over, and that's the same thing, just using the operator not. But just for clarity's sake, and so it's easy to understand, we're going to say while game over equals false. All right. If I run this, you're going to see it's going to loop. And if I enter a number in already, 1, but it loops forever. And that's because there's nothing telling it to stop. So you can see this is telling me I am very incorrect. And this is going to keep running and running for a very long time. So I have to manually stop it. Okay, and it says, oh, there was an error. It was manually stopped. Now the reason it did that is there was nothing updating this code. So what I can do to fix that is I can ask the user to have a guess inside the code. So let me grab this line and I'm going to cut it. And then down here, I'm going to paste it. Okay, so now this should work. There is one other consideration though that we need to make, and some of you might have spotted it already. So if I enter 1, incorrect, 2, incorrect, 3, incorrect, 4, incorrect, a very big number, incorrect, 7, correct, but I'm still stuck in the loop, even though I'm getting it right. I'm stuck. So what must I do to fix it? Well, I have to update this Boolean value. So instead of it being false, I need to make it true. So if they get the correct guess, what I can do is say game over and a single equal sign equals true. Remember, the single equals means that is now going to be equal to that value. So if game over equals true, the next time it loops around, it's going to say, hey, we don't need to run anymore because game over is equal to true, and it's going to go straight down to this line here. So let's print game over. All right, let me run this code. Let's see if that works. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8, 9, 7. Done. Game over. It worked. Now we could probably make this a little fancier. Should we do it? Yeah, I think we should do it. Let's make a score. So score equals 0. And we'll say every time they get it incorrect, we'll say score equals score plus 1. Okay. So every time they get it wrong, they get a higher score. And down here we could say something like this: print game over and print game over, your score is score. And we might need to say game over, your score is score. Another one, lower the better. There we go. All right, so that should add 1 each time. Let's run it. So if I go 2, 3, 4, and then get it correct, it says game over, your score is 3, lower the better. And let's just run it again and see what happens if we do it perfectly. Game over, your score is 0. Okay, so that is a while loop, and you can see how we've done a combination here of a while loop and an if statement together. They work really well side by side. Now, one limitation to the while loop is in its current form, this will run forever, and you'll see what I mean. If I enter, it has the ability just to run forever and ever and ever and ever and never end. And this will be a terrible score now, 24. And that's why we have another loop. What I'm going to get you to do is close out of lesson 4. Like so. Oh, it's not going to close for me. Why won't you close? Is it still running somewhere? Okay, well, I'm going to leave it, and I'm just going to right click and go new Python file, and I'm going to call this one lesson 4 as well, but then I'm going to go, oh, it's 04, isn't it? Yep. And then we're going to dash for loop, and I might go for 2, like so on. All right, can I close this one now? Still won't let me close it. That's okay. I wonder if I can refactor it though. If you can do this, please go ahead. We're going to call this one 4.1 and we'll say while. All right, well, at least it let me do that. But and it closed. All right, so that was our while loop there, and you can see how it works. But now we're going to talk about a for loop. And for loops operate a bit different to a while loop. A while loop, you can see I've got a Boolean value, and I can run the while loop. Now, I could have done this as well, to be fair. I could have said something like, while score is less than 7. And that way, now they're going to have 7 attempts to get it correct. And if they don't, it's going to end. I could have said that. So that's how, while loop works in a condition. But let's have a look at how a for loop works now. So let's close that one. So for a for loop, we're going to make the same game, but this time we're going to do it in a different way. So the first thing is we're going to say my guess, or my number, capital N, equals 5. And let's say user guess equals int input, enter a number between 1 and 10. Cool, I left out the please this time. So a for loop looks like this. We write for. So like the other one with a while, we start with for. But now we need to have a variable that we're going to use to iterate on. If that didn't make sense at all, don't worry. I'm going to think of just a random letter. Number. Let's go the number I, okay? So for I, and now we need to say how many times we would like this thing to loop. So we say in the range, or in range, bracket, and now the number I enter here is how many times it will loop. So if I write 100, it'll go 100 times. I can also say 1 to 10, which means it'll start with 1 and go to 10. Now the number it starts with is what this I value is going to be. So if I say 6 to 10, then I is going to be equal to 6. If I just say 10, then I is going to be equal to 0. So unless I specify, I is going to be equal to 0. If I say, it'll change. So now I do a column. All right, so for I in range 10. Now, to make sure we understand how for loops work, I'm going to ignore all of that for a minute. And I'm going to say print I. So print out I. So whatever the value of I is, I want you to print. Before you wonder, or you might have already thought this, but do you need to say I equals 0 up here? Well, no, you don't. By creating this here, it does that for you automatically. So it could be anything, right? I could write new, I could write anything in there. We're just going with I. So for I in range 10, print I. Let's see what happens when I run this. Enter a value. Oh yeah, that was just from before, so 0. Okay, let's see what happens. So it said 0. As I predicted, that would start at 0. And then it went 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. No 10 on the bottom. Even though it says 10 there, it didn't go all the way to 10. The reason being is it started with 0. So 0 all the way down to 9 is 10 values. If you don't believe me, count backwards all the way and you'll see there are 10 times. That means this went round 10 times. If I write 100 in there, what's my bottom number going to be? Well, if I run it, it's going to be, I'll just enter something in there first, 99. So it goes around 99 times. It goes around 100 times, but the first one is 0. Something else I could do is I could use something like a user guess for my range, and I could put the user guess in there, which means whatever the user puts in, let's go a really big number, it'll loop all the way around the big number. But it's easy just to define what you want. So you can see with the for loop, we have a lot of control over how many times we go and do the loop. With the while loop, we still have a lot of control. It just looks a little different. And they both have sort of a use case. They both can kind of do the same thing, but one of them fits better one way and the other fits better the other way. So let's finish this one. So we're going to say here, firstly, the user needs to guess inside of our for loop. So let's go like that. So user guess, they're going to have a go. We're going to say if user guess equals my number. If they get it right, we're going to say print correct. And else, if they don't get it right, we're going to print wrong. Okay. I might change this just so you can see what I'm talking about. I'm going to make it 3. So it's going to go 0, 1, 2. So that means you've got 3 attempts to get my number right. So ready? Enter a number. Number 1. Wrong. Number 2. Wrong. Number 3. Wrong. I didn't get to 5. Let's run it again. Number 5. Correct. But you can see it still runs again. Now there's a few ways we can tell it to leave the loop. One of them is by writing break. So by using break, it'll leave the loop straight away. So that'll break out of the loop. So this one we have a little more control over than our previous one in terms of how many times it goes around. You also have this extra variable that it makes inside. Now we do use these a lot later on when it comes to some of the more advanced features that we're going to get to. But for now, you just need to know how they actually work. We might just finish this out by doing the score. We could say score, and let's do the score a fancy way this time. Let's say score equals 10. And every time they get it wrong, we're going to say score equals score minus 1. And then at the end, let's print score. All right, let's see what happens now. I know that was very fast. You might need to pause it and get that in. So if we get it wrong a bunch of times, 1, 2, 3, 4. Oh. Because it's only 3 times. Let's make that 10 again. Here we go. Run again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And we got a score of 6. So out of 10. Now you'd be more clear if this was a game you're making, but you can see it all worked. So that's how our loops work. We're going to be using loops quite a bit, especially like I said with the more advanced tools. So I hope you learned something in this lesson, and I'll see you in the next one.